bio in the interest of time, but Professor Francis Anthony Boyle is a best-selling author. He helped write the Biological Weapons Convention. He served on the board of directors of Amnesty International, represented Bosnia-Herzegovina at the World Court. He served as a legal advisor to the Palestinian delegation to the Middle East peace negotiations from 91 to 93. In 2007, he delivered the Bertrand Russell Peace Lectures. Professor Boyle teaches international law at the University of Illinois, campaign, and the author of, and I'm not going to go over all the books he's written. You can just type in his name and find them. He has a PhD, magna cum laude, from Harvard University and more. And he basically took the somewhat secretive Harvard PhD that Kissinger and a few others have had, where they actually tell you how things really work. That's what Carol Quigley's book was about, was to have a manual so people could understand, wait a minute, we fund the terrorist, but then we fight the terrorist. And so he's a unique individual to break down the full spectrum of what we face. And for representing Muslims persecuted in this country, clearly have done nothing. He's been put on no-fly list, you name it. So he's been through a lot. He's been to the Middle East countless times. He can break down what he thinks is happening. But it's pretty obvious now. You've got Netanyahu openly endorsing ISIS a few weeks ago. You've got other countries endorsing it. You've got Saudi Arabia helping fund it. You've got NATO involved, British Special Forces, even the London Guardian reports, as we told you years ago, training some of them. I'm not saying they run them, but they're funding them and turning them loose. Then you've got Russia saying they may start striking Ukraine anytime because of shelling into their country. Over 1,000 dead in the last few days, according to the Ukrainians, bombing civilian areas, and the Ukrainians are bragging about it. You've got Soros behind that. All hell's breaking loose with the border being opened by design. That's now confirmed. The elite are bringing in global crisis. So I want to ask somebody who's been through the similar globalist training but turned against him early on, what he thinks the grand plan is. Is this order out of chaos, or do they just think it is? Or has megalomania set in like Hitler and Napoleon with these adventures? Who's running the show, and where does he think it's all going? If anybody can tell us, it's Francis Boyle. Thanks for coming on, sir. What do you think's going on?
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Alex, and my best to your audience. Yes, when you mention what's going on, I think we have to go back to my teacher, mentor, and friend, the late, great Hans Morgenthau, who founded international political science. And in fact, Kissinger revered Morgenthau. And when he taught international relations at Harvard, he used Morgenthau's casebook, Politics Among Nations. And what is going on now, and if you do a Google search under my name, you'll see an essay by me entitled Unlimited Imperialism, which Morgenthau was writing about a phenomena which for him described Alexander, the Romans, Hitler, Napoleon, and others of this nature, to distinguish it from ordinary imperialism. Namely, they want to control and dominate the entire world. And what I argued in my essay is taking Morgenthau's definition of unlimited imperialism. That is what we have seen the United States power elite, financial power elite, engage in since the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001. They're going for broke, just like the Romans or Alexander, Napoleon, or Hitler, and they will continue to go all out. And the difference between Bush and Obama, it's Tweedledum versus Tweedledee. I've been through all these elite programs at Chicago and Harvard, and Obama's was behind me at Harvard Law School. Romney and I actually took all of our first-year law courses together at Harvard Law School. So there's no real difference here as far as the elite sees it. They're going for broke. And in the process, they realized to do this, they must establish a police state here at home. And you and I have been through this before. I believe I was in your documentary on this matter, so I'm not going to belabor it here. But, starting with the USA Patriot Act, the FISA Amendments Act, the National Defense Authorization Act, which, by the way, Senator Levin said when they first drafted it, it did not apply to United States citizens. And it was President Obama who insisted that it applied to United States citizens so that the military could basically pick up and disappear any citizen they want to here in the United States for whatever reason. Now we have the Obama drone campaign. I'm not here to justify President Bush Jr., but even President Bush Jr. did not arrogate to himself the right to murder United States citizens, which Obama and his Attorney General Holder have done and have made it quite clear, Holder and Brennan, the head of the CIA, that they're fully prepared to do that here in the United States of America.
So there's an accelerated rotting. Let me ask you this before you go into the big picture and talk about what's happening in the Middle East currently and where you see their next step being. Again, Professor Francis Boyle joins us. What I'm getting at is it seems like a classical power grab on every front, but whereas Caesar and Alexander actually went out and led their forces, they weren't even trying to so much degenerate their own culture just to dominate what was happening back in Rome, but that degeneracy came regardless. What I'm saying is the political elite run by Wall Street that make 40-to-1 bets with other people's money seems so dysfunctional and mentally ill. Looking at this as a student of history, I don't see their plan succeeding. I do see there being a chance of nuclear war and them destroying civilization. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. I mean, how dangerous are these people? What is your gut gestalt on where we are when the history books are written later?
Well, on both the domestic and the international point, on the domestic point first, you're right about the financial elite in America. All of a sudden, the National Defense Authorization Act came out of nowhere. Why? They were terrified by the Occupy Wall Street movement taking off all over the country. And that's what produced NDAA. On the international arena, yes, of course, we could have a serious war at any time, as you pointed out in Ukraine, where Obama and his neocons and his neo-libs, there's not much difference, sponsored a neo-Nazi coup d'etat in Ukraine that overthrew a democratically elected government. We've now had firing across the undemarcated border between Ukraine and Russia. It appears they're trying to provoke Russia to invade Ukraine. And then the trap will have been sprung, and you'll have their puppet there, Poroshenko, invoke Article 51, the right of collective self-defense, and you'll have NATO forces streaming into Ukraine for sure. It's not exactly clear where they'll stop. You remember in the Clinton administration when they were bombing Serbia over Kosovo, General Wesley Clark ordered the NATO troops to take the Kosovo airport. And fortunately, the British military commander, Mike Jackson, refused because it was occupied by Russian troops and said that he's not prepared to start World War III. Well, who knows what will happen? The current policy towards Russia is being orchestrated by Zbigniew Brzezinski. I went through the same PhD program at Harvard that produced both Kissinger and Brzezinski before me. Brzezinski is an expatriate Pole who hates the Russians, and he wants to see them broken up into Russia, broken up into 1 million pieces. The top White House advisor at the National Security Council on Russia is a Brzezinski protege. Obama's mentor at Columbia was Brzezinski, and Brzezinski ran his entire foreign affairs campaign in 2008. So this is an extremely dangerous situation in Ukraine. Likewise in Syria and Iraq. at any time, Obama could start bombing in Iraq. And as you correctly pointed out in your introductory comments, ISIS was by us. It started with the Obama administration. Even Senator Rand Paul said this, and I'm a political independent, as you know, Alex. But even Senator Rand Paul said, well, yeah, we were arming ISIS, which is true. That's where the Benghazi operation was all about, shipping Muslim fundamentalists, weapons, equipment, and supplies into Syria. This war against Syria is Obama's idea, and he is armed, equipped, supplied, and trained every jihadi they can find, including those they used to overthrow Gaddafi.
Sure, let me ask you this then. Why is the ruling establishment doing things that they've never done so nakedly by an order of power? Or correct me if you think that's a wrong statement. I mean, they just seem to really have a crazed aura to them that just reeks of disaster. I mean, they just don't seem to care and have any sanity. And as you said, we came millimeters in Pristina, in Kosovo, from war with the Russians. We came millimeters in Georgia. And now it appears with Soros and the rest of them that even if the U.S. policy doesn't go with this, there's other NATO forces and Soros forces that are hell-bent on starting a war with Russia. How do they think they're going? Where do they want to go with this? I mean, I don't see it being successful.
Well, and also with China, Alex, Obama's pivot to Asia, taken right out of Brzezinski's grand chessboard, and you have these little bitty pieces of rock, the Diaoyu Islands right off of Taiwan, that Japan stole from China in the 1895 war of aggression against China when it was weak. And yet, after World War II, we refused to give it back to China. And now we, the United States, both Secretary of State Clinton and Secretary of Defense Hagel, have threatened to go to war so that Japan, the militarists in Japan, can hang on to these little pieces of rock right there in the...
and now the Chinese government, as you know, I've been telling the audience, in the last week, in their official dailies, have said, okay, they're prepared for nuclear war with the U.S. They're going on maximum alert and build up. And then the same elite have heavily invested in China. I mean, I look at the globalists, this collection of neocons and liberal cons and all the rest of them, neo-libs. They really don't even have a formula at all. It's just screw everyone, screw over civilization, screw over classical egalitarianism. These people are the plague.
Well, you could read Machiavelli's The Prince or Thomas Hobbes' The Leviathan. The Prince for foreign affairs and Leviathan for constructing a totalitarian dictatorship. Because if you go through any of these elite programs, like at the University of Chicago,
they have you read them,
where the neocons come from, where I was schooled as an undergrad, and then Harvard, you have to know Machiavelli and Hobbes by your heart, and then add in there Nietzsche, and that pretty much accounts for it.
And by the way, that was my next point. And again, of course, these are philosophers that you know, that people like Hitler loved. For those that don't understand, Hillary, her favorite book's 1984 because she sees it as a beautiful world. And when you were bringing up Kissinger, like in the, you know, the individual exposing the, you know, total empire, they see it as a model. And so that's what you're getting at.
That's correct. And Clinton went to Yale Law School. I interviewed there for a job in 1977. They're no different from Harvard Law School. Bill Clinton went there too. So again, what you have here is elitist training grounds to produce these imperial managers. Whether Democrats or Republicans is pretty irrelevant. It's all the same, to rule the world. Only now, as I said, after September 11th, in the, I'm sure you've discussed the PNAC report, they're going for broke. They're literally going to try to take over Russia and China. And the Brzezinski Grand Chessboard lays it all out there if you want to read it.
It's a madness, and they've been sticking with the same plan for 40 years, 60 years, depending on how you look at it. How do you see it ending? Because I know a lot of people in the establishment I talk to are pretty freaked out. The military's freaked out. The police are waking up. Americans can see that cages are being built around us. I mean, this isn't going to be like some British Empire where we at least get some of the goods. And I'm not endorsing the British Empire. This is an empire that dominates humanity itself. I mean, it's the job of every human on the planet to resist this empire, but what do we replace it with?
Well, you're correct, Alex, that if it keeps going the way it is, we're going to have another world war, either with Russia or China or both. It's I don't know how much time we have. And then the final consolidation of a police state here at home in order to run it. And it'll be just like 1984 by George Orwell. We're coming very close to that. Permanent war abroad and a police state at home. Yes, we're close. We don't have much time. I don't know how much time we have. Anything could go wrong. Remember, 100 years ago, there was this assassination in Sarajevo. I visited that scene when I was Bosnia's lawyer.
The Crown Prince.
Right. No one thought that would lead to a world war, and yet 10 million people were dead. Well, now we have nuclear weapons, certainly in the hands of the United States, Russia, China, Israel, Pakistan. Pakistan's another tinder point. It's very clear the neocons want to crack up Pakistan and neutralize the Pakistani nukes, just as they cracked up and destroyed Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Sudan. And this goes back to the memoirs by General Wesley Clark, where he admits after 9/11, 2001, the neocons under Wolfowitz in the Pentagon came up with a plan to take out 7 Arab and Muslim states. And they're going right down that list. And I was at the University of Chicago with Wolfowitz. He was ahead of me getting his PhD in political science and international relations, while I was getting my undergrad in international relations with Hans Morgenthau. He's part of this neocon cabal. His mentor there was Albert Wohlstetter from the Rand Corporation.
Now you can watch The Alex Jones Show live as it happens at Infowars.com/show.
You'll find links to all of our content there and a free 15-day trial for Prison Planet TV.
More than 60 movies and documentaries all in one place at Infowars.com/show.
Briefly, don't forget this hour was brought to you by the non-GMO, developed right here in America, super high quality, storable foods and other preparedness items from mypatriotsupply.com/Alex, mypatriotsupply.com/Alex. Food lasts 20 years. It's great to have an insurance policy you can eat. Give them a call, 866-229-0927. You're nuts if you don't get high-quality storable foods. The place I go, the place I recommend is mypatriotsupply.com. Okay, we got 5 minutes left. Mr. Boyle, Professor Boyle, I appreciate your time, your energy, and all the books you've written and what you've done to try to help this country and the world. I do see a big awakening happening, but I see the political class organizing to try to crush peaceful political redress of grievances. And as Jack Kennedy said, those that make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And the system really does plan for this big war with the American people. Your closing comments on some way out of this without having a civil war here in the empire.
Well, you know, we still have our First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of religion, that we have to do everything to organize to stop these people. We also have our Second Amendment rights. We've discussed this before, Alex. I'm not a gun person myself, but the Second Amendment does recognize now freedom to bear arms. And even Justice Scalia, in his decision on the Heller case, said one of the purposes of the Second Amendment is to prevent a tyrannical government. So those are the directions we're moving in. I think everyone, not, I'm not here to promote violence, but everyone has to do, I think, under these terrible circumstances, what his or her conscience tells them to do, because we could have a war very soon. Congress goes out of session in August, and that's always a bad time for imperial presidents to wage war, because they know there is no congressional control upon them. There is no prospect of anyone introducing a bill of impeachment to restrain them. I certainly have advocated that Obama be impeached the sooner the better, to stop this movement towards war in a police state.
Sure. Pat Buchanan's argument that Republicans can win brownie points by not doing it and let him get worse is like saying, murderers should go free. You then join with the immorality by not impeaching him. And even Ron Paul said he's never seen anything like Obama. And he's usually, no, let's don't impeach because they're all bad. We should impeach them all. But he said, no. Last Friday, he said, this is a special viral growth of evil. Let me just, in closing, say this, and then get your take on it. If you can do 5 more minutes in overdrive, I understand you probably can't. But Professor,
sure.
Used to soldiers fought. Used to Caesar fought. Some Alexander fought. This is really in the last 50 to 100 years. But now it's really coming to a head where the soldiers don't fight. It's drones.
Do you understand how dark it is? How far down the line we are? How late it is?
Professor Francis Boyle is our guest, best-selling author, researcher, political insider from his past research. Look, it's been a sport of kings and, quote, nobility, even above hunting, dangerous game to go out and be involved in combat. And even though it was primitive and violent, you could at least have some respect for the fact that warrior kings would lead people into battle. Compared to the elites we have, I mean, Napoleon was a famous artillery officer and then led his forces, even though he was a terrible person in many respects. Now, Hitler won the Iron Cross, the Congressional Medal of Honor, first class, the German equivalent. So in the 3-4 minutes we have left, Francis Boyle, my issue is they're giving Purple Hearts to the equivalent medals to the drone pilots. It's not just the elite separated from the human suffering that they're causing. And it just seems like nature's out of balance. There's almost like a singularity of evil coming. What's your thoughts in closing on that?
Well, I think it's here. If you look at the neocon pedigree, it was all founded by Professor Leo Strauss at the University of Chicago. I was educated in that system. I studied with his right-hand man, Joseph Cropsey. Strauss had just retired. And Strauss's teacher, mentor, and sponsor in Germany was Professor Carl Schmitt. And Carl Schmitt was the leading Nazi law professor of his era. He justified every hideous atrocity the Nazis inflicted on everyone, including the Jews. And so you're right, Alex, what we've seen overtaking the country is this neo-Nazi mentality that is now possessed our power elite. I mean, if you listen to Secretary of State Kerry, he sounds mentally deranged oftentimes when he's giving his perorations there on TV, and many of the rest of them do too. So I think that this is what we've seen, and you're correct.
We're between a rock and a hard place because they're already set up and ready for an armed revolution. They want to use that to bring in total tyranny. But then they're attacking us, so under common law and common sense, I think this is where I'm going with this. I think if everything does kick off and becomes violent, I just want to make sure that the people that are calling the shots, they want to be back in their armored fortresses and send the police out and the military out to do this. And I think it's very important at the end of all this that they be brought to justice and that they be dealt with. Because I think it's only that fear that will hold them back. That's why we need to impeach Obama and not try to make political points, for the Republicans who are just as big a problem.
I agree. I agree with that. And ultimately, the question will be, will common, ordinary, everyday U.S. soldiers fire on U.S. citizens when ordered to by the power elite? I certainly hope they don't, because the common, ordinary, everyday soldiers are taken from us. The power elite, most of them are chicken hawks. They all bugged out of the Vietnam War. I have no problem with people avoiding the Vietnam War because it was illegal and immoral.
Sure, just don't be a warmonger later.
But a generation later, they're sending young men and women from middle class, lower class, economically deprived areas of our country off to fight and die for oil and profits and glory. And the question will be, how much longer will the young men and women of our armed forces take being cannon fodder for the power elite?
Alex Jones here for Infowars.com. We're going to be intensifying our efforts to awaken free humanity to the scourge of the globalist in the month of July. And starting this July 4th, we are going to slash prices in a celebration of true Americana, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence on all of the Made in America products that you will find at madein1776.com or InfoWarsStore.com. We're talking about Made in America belt buckles in brass and nickeled brass that state it loud and proud. Molon Labe. That's why we have the best-selling Made in America men's and women's Molon Labe Infowars.com shirts. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a win-win. You vote with your dollars. You support the most hardcore organization out there for promoting true ideas of libertarianism, constitutionalism, basic human empowerment. But more importantly, you get T-shirts and belt buckles so you can meet like-minded people. So you have a conversation starter with friends and family and coworkers. We are reaching out to each other. And you also throw it in the face of the anti-gunners and the rest of the parasites out there that you're a free man and woman, and that you're not going to be a slave, that you're not going to be intimidated to shut up by their tyranny that they call political correctness. That's why in the month of July, we have got giant specials on everything at madein1776.com. But to expand the InfoWar, we're offering the biggest special in the history, 13 years of PrisonPlanet.tv, our multimedia platform. We're offering the equivalent of more than 5 months free right now when you get a membership at PrisonPlanet.tv, and you get 11 memberships that can be used with the same username and passcode so you can share it with friends and family. Now is the time to fund the war bonds. Now is the time to fund the InfoWar. Now is the time to get aggressive. Now is the time to double down. Now is the time to realize you are the people that made the InfoWar so successful and one of the leading lights worldwide against tyranny. You don't stand behind us, you stand right beside us, and I salute all of you on this July 4th, 2014, and going forward in the month of July and onward. This is about freedom worldwide and that desire for human dignity and self-determination that beats in the human breast. We are brothers and sisters together in the true spirit of liberty and the animating contest of liberty. And so I quote in closing the great Thomas Jefferson, that I have sworn on the altar of God resistance against every form of tyranny. And never forget, if you are watching or listening to this transmission, you are the resistance.